When I was 9, my parents hired a babysitter named Clara Whitlow. At the time, I thought she was just an odd woman, the kind you'd see at the grocery store and avoid making eye contact with. Looking back now, I think there was something wrong with her, something far deeper than just odd. My parents needed someone to watch me for long stretches in the evenings because of work. Clara was cheap, available, and lived just a few streets away. They were relieved to find her. I was not. The first night she came over, I noticed she didn't bring a handbag, just herself. She didn't even ask for instructions from my parents for meals, bedtime, or anything. She simply sat down at the kitchen table and watched me with a wide smile until my parents left. That was the beginning of a year I've never been able to erase from my memory. Clara didn't babysit in the traditional sense. She didn't make dinner or play games. She didn't read to me. Instead, she insisted on routines of her own design. At exactly 7 o'clock, she made me sit cross-legged on the living room carpet facing the darkened hallway. She would stand behind me, her hands resting lightly on my shoulders, and she would whisper things into my ear. Strange, broken instructions like,
"Don't blink when it passes. Smile when it stops to look at you. If it crouches, crouch lower."
I never knew what she was talking about. Sometimes I tried to turn my head, but she'd grip my shoulders hard, her nails digging into my skin.
"Keep watching. If you look away, it'll notice."
But the hallway was always empty. Just shadows. Just the dark. At least that's what I told myself. One night, she made me sit in front of the bathroom mirror with the lights off. She crouched beside me, her face inches from mine.
"Don't move. Don't breathe. He likes it when you look like glass."
We sat there, staring into the mirror's black surface. I could hear the pipes creaking and the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs. And then, after what felt like hours, I swore I saw something move in the reflection. Not behind us, but in the mirror itself. It was like the shadows had bent wrong. I gasped and tried to pull away, but Clara gripped my wrist and hissed,
"He's almost here. Don't you dare break the glass."
When I cried, she slapped me, hard. My cheek burned, and the sound echoed in the tiled room. That was the first time I realized she wasn't just strange, she was dangerous. I told my parents what she did. They laughed it off and said I was exaggerating. My dad joked that Clara probably just wanted me to stop being afraid of the dark. My mom said she seemed perfectly nice, and kids had big imaginations, so they kept hiring her. Clara grew bolder. She stopped turning on the lights in the house, said they drew attention. We'd sit for hours in the dark, with the only glow coming from the streetlights outside. She'd make me listen to the house, pointing out every creak.
"Do you hear him? He's been here longer than you, longer than me. If you are quiet, he'll let you stay."
I hated those nights most, because sometimes I did hear things. Heavy, dragging footsteps in the attic. Slow, deliberate knocks inside the walls. Breathing. I was never sure if Clara was making it up, or if she was the only one who truly knew what lived in that house. The worst night happened in December. My parents were gone until midnight. Clara told me it was time to play the crawling game. She made me lie flat on the living room floor. Then she lay down beside me, face pressed to the carpet, her voice hot in my ear.
"We crawl when he crawls. Do you hear him?"
At first, I heard nothing, but then, yes, a sound from the hallway, the scrape of nails against wood, slow, deliberate dragging. Something moving low to the ground. Clara began to move, elbows digging into the carpet as she slithered toward the hall. She gestured for me to follow. I froze. Terror pinned me in place. The sound grew louder, a wet dragging like flesh pulling across the floor. I couldn't breathe, and my eyes watered from holding still. And then, just before the shadow in the hall shifted against the light, Clara shot up, slammed the door shut, and pressed her whole body against it, laughing like a maniac.
"Not tonight. Not my boy tonight."
I bolted upstairs, locked myself in my room, and cried until my parents came home. They finally fired her after that. I don't know what Clara told them, but they decided she wasn't a good fit. That was the end of it for them, but not for me. Because even now, decades later, I still wake some nights to that same dragging sound in the dark, that heavy, deliberate crawl across the floor. And I remember Clara's words, "If you're quiet, he'll let you stay." So I stay quiet, and I pray he doesn't change his mind. It started on a rainy Thursday evening when my wife Hannah and I had tickets to a rare night out. She had begged me for weeks to see some play downtown, and after months of exhaustion with work and our 3-year-old son Nathan, I caved. We needed a sitter. Our usual woman was out of town, and the others we trusted weren't available. That's when the name Marlene came up. She's older and a little strange, but she's cheap and good with kids, my neighbor Carol said. I should have listened to the hesitation in her tone, but I didn't. When Marlene arrived, she didn't look like the babysitters I remembered growing up with. She was gaunt, her skin sallow like she hadn't seen sunlight in years, and her clothes smelled faintly of damp earth. Her eyes were glassy, but when she smiled at Nathan, he smiled back instantly. That was enough to ease Hannah's nerves, and we left. The play was long and tedious. My phone buzzed twice, but the number was blocked. I ignored it, thinking it was spam. When we got home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I stepped into the hallway, and a smell hit me. It was sweet and rancid like rotten meat. Hannah and I went straight upstairs to check on Nathan, and that's when I saw her. Marlene was sitting on the floor outside Nathan's room, her back hunched and her head twitching in tiny, insect-like jerks. Her fingernails scraped lazily against the hardwood, making a sound that shot down my spine. "Marlene?" I asked. Her head turned slowly, and her mouth hung open wider than it should have, revealing teeth blackened with rot. Her lips trembled as if trying to form words, but only a guttural groan came out. Hannah screamed from inside Nathan's room. I shoved past Marlene, who snapped her head toward me so fast I heard her neck crack. She lunged, but her movements were jerky and uncoordinated, as if she was learning how to walk again. I slammed the door. Hannah clutched Nathan, who was crying silently, eyes wide with terror. "What the hell is wrong with her?" Hannah whispered, shaking. I didn't answer because deep down, I already knew she was a zombie. The scratching started at the door. Long, deliberate strokes. Marlene's voice gurgled, rasping out fragments of words. Nathan buried his face in Hannah's chest, sobbing. As I pressed my ear against the door, the scratching stopped, and we were left in a total deafening silence. Then, the sound of something wet sliding down the wood. We stayed there for what felt like hours. At some point, I realized the house was alive with faint noises. Footsteps that dragged, cabinet doors opening and closing downstairs, and a wet chewing sound followed by soft moans. Finally, near dawn, the sound stopped. I wanted to believe she'd left, but I couldn't bring myself to check. I crept to the window and saw the yard empty, the rain washing away dark stains on the porch. We waited until the sun was high before leaving the room. The living room was wrecked, the sofa shredded, the carpet soaked in something black that smelled metallic. The back door hung open, swinging gently. "She's gone," Hannah whispered, her voice hollow. For weeks after that, things kept happening. Scratches appeared on the inside of our windows at night. Nathan's toys were moved into strange patterns on the floor, though none of us touched them. Once, I found muddy footprints in the kitchen that led to the basement door. The lock had been broken. The worst part was Nathan. He wouldn't speak much anymore. He sat in silence, staring at the corners of rooms, nodding as if listening to someone whisper. When I asked him what he was doing, he would say,
"Marlene tells me stories."
I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it was trauma. Maybe he was just too young to understand. But then came the night I woke to the sound of his laughter echoing through the monitor. I rushed into his room, and there she was. Marlene sat on the edge of his bed, her skeletal hand stroking his hair. Her skin hung loose with chunks of gray flesh missing, her eyes milky with rot. Nathan was smiling up at her, whispering things I couldn't hear. When she turned to me, her mouth split wider, her jaw sagging unnaturally. "He stays," she croaked. I grabbed Nathan, ripping him away from her cold grasp. She shrieked, a sound that rattled the windows, and lunged. Her nails raked my arm, burning like acid. I kicked her back, slamming the door and locking it. We fled that night and left everything behind. The house, our things, our lives. But it didn't matter, because she followed. I see her sometimes in crowds, her pale face watching from across the street. I hear Nathan whispering to her when he thinks we aren't listening. I've just woken to find him standing over our bed, his tiny hand gripping a jagged piece of glass. His eyes are glassy, unfocused, just like hers, and he smiles at me in the same way that he smiles at her and says,
Daddy, it's your turn to be the babysitter now.
I was 16 the first time I agreed to watch over Ethan. It wasn't exactly babysitting. He was 12 and old enough to be left alone, but his parents were cautious people, or maybe superstitious. They lived in a wealthy suburb that clung to the bones of an older town, a place where abandoned factories and cracked smokestacks still stood as reminders of what used to be. The houses there were new, expensive. When I arrived, Ethan's parents were already dressed for a dinner party. They barely introduced me before rushing out the door. All they said was, "He can be different sometimes. Don't worry about it." Different didn't begin to cover it. Ethan didn't speak much. His pale eyes slid over me, as if he was measuring something I couldn't see. Instead of watching television or playing video games, he went straight upstairs to the toy room, a cavernous walk-in closet stuffed with shelves of puzzles, dolls, and Legos. In the middle sat a low wooden table piled with brightly colored blocks. I left him alone, but through the door I could hear him, not muttering, not pretending, talking. Steady, calm sentences with pauses, as if listening to someone else's reply. At first I assumed it was just imagination, the way kids invent invisible friends. But Ethan's voice had a rhythm, a formality to it. It was almost like he was answering questions. Around 9 he came downstairs, heated some leftovers and ate in silence. He didn't look at me, didn't ask anything, didn't even seem tired. Then he climbed back upstairs to the toy room and shut the door behind him. At midnight, I forced him to go to bed. He didn't argue, he just stared at me for a moment too long before slipping into his room. That's when the night began to unravel. I slept in the guest room. The house was still, the kind of stillness that makes every creak sound intentional. Around 2, I woke to a faint clatter, plastic rattling on wood. It sounded like the Legos shifting in the toy room. I sat up, heart thumping, and called out, "Ethan, go to bed!" The noise stopped immediately. I stared at the toy room door in the hallways. It was shut tight, with no light coming from underneath. How could he even see in there? I forced myself up and opened the door and flicked the switch. The toys were scattered where he'd left them. No, Ethan, just silence. I shut the door and went back to bed, telling myself it was nothing. But an hour later, I woke again. The room wasn't dark anymore. In the hallway, a pale glow seeped from the crack beneath the toy room door. "Ethan," I said, louder this time. No answer. That's when I saw them. 2 shapes that were faint but undeniable. Outlines of bare feet beneath the toy room door. Perfectly still, my mouth went dry. Then from behind the door came a small giggle. Not playful, mocking. I lunged forward, yanked the door open, and nothing. The closet light buzzed above me. Toys lay in messy heaps. The carpet where those feet had been was empty. My chest tightened so sharply I thought I'd pass out. I stumbled into the hallway, desperate to prove Ethan was behind this, desperate to cling to something rational. I opened his door and he was asleep. I found him sprawled in bed, his breathing slow and steady, as if he hadn't moved all night. I locked his door, lay down beside his bed, and tried to convince myself that being near him made me safer. But even then, with my cheek pressed against the carpet trying to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was in the house with us. Something that had been waiting inside that toy room long before I arrived. By dawn, I must have drifted into a shallow sleep. The sound of the front door unlocking jolted me awake. His parents swept in, cheerful and oblivious. I didn't tell them. What could I say? That their son had shadows living in his toy room? That I'd seen feet that belonged to no one? They wouldn't have believed me. I took the money, left the house, and never agreed to return, but the image stayed with me. The faint light under the closet door, the frozen feet, that awful, deliberate giggle. Years later, I can still hear it. And sometimes, in the middle of the night, I'll wake to the sound of something shifting just out of sight and the sound of plastic rattling in the dark, as if whatever lived in Ethan's toy room followed me home. I never liked having strangers in my house, but my wife insisted we hire a babysitter. "It's just for one night," she said, clutching her purse, as if that justified leaving our 4-year-old daughter Emma in the care of someone else. Her name was Clara, 17, maybe 18, with polite answers and the practiced smile of someone used to interviews. She had glowing references from the agency, but still, when she stood in our doorway, I felt the smallest tremor of unease. She was too quiet. "We'll be back before midnight," my wife told her. Clara nodded, expression blank, as if midnight meant nothing to her at all. Dinner was loud and cheerful, but my mind kept circling back to the house. When we returned, everything was in order. Emma was asleep. Clara sat on the couch, not watching television, nor was she on her phone. She was just staring at the blank television screen. When I asked how Emma had been, she smiled.
"She's a good girl. I'll come again, if you like."
That should have been it, but the next morning Emma told me something strange over breakfast. "Daddy," she whispered, spoon poised over her cereal, "Clara doesn't blink." I laughed it off, but later, while working from home, I noticed my daughter sitting at the top of the stairs. "She's outside," Emma whispered when I asked what she was doing. "Waiting." I looked. No one was there, but the back of my neck prickled. The second time Clara came, I watched her more carefully. She was attentive with Emma, but in a way that seemed rehearsed, asking questions in a flat tone, nodding a beat too late, smiling with her mouth but not her eyes. I confronted her gently when I drove her home later that night. "Everything okay?" I asked.
"Of course,"
she said, finally blinking, though it looked deliberate. My wife thought I was paranoid and overprotective, and that Clara was fine. But Clara grew stranger.
"I'm not babysitting Emma,"
she said one night.
"I'm babysitting you."
The words chilled me. The next Saturday, I pretended to leave for errands, then circled back and parked down the block. Through the living room window, I saw Clara sitting cross-legged on the floor with Emma. They weren't playing. They were just staring at each other, unblinking, as if locked in some silent agreement I wasn't part of. When I knocked and came in, Clara didn't flinch. She stood, smiled, and said,
"Emma is learning quickly."
"Learning what?" I demanded. Her smile widened.
"Boundaries."
I told her not to come back. My wife protested, but I was firm. Something about Clara wasn't right. We could find someone else. But Clara did come back. One night around 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of humming, and I crept into Emma's room, heart pounding. Clara sat on the floor beside her bed. She wasn't surprised to see me. She didn't move at all. I lunged for her, but she slipped past me with inhuman speed, gliding into the hallway. By the time I reached the stairs, she was gone. The front door was still locked. After that, I stopped sleeping well. Every creak of the house, every flicker of shadow convinced me she was inside. I installed cameras and checked the locks twice a night, but sometimes, watching the footage back, I'd see frames that didn't make sense, blurs in the corners and static shapes near Emma's bed. My wife said the system was glitching, but I swear in one clip, I saw Clara crouched in the hallway. Emma grew withdrawn. She whispered to herself, and her eyes darted to hidden shadows in corners. 2 nights ago, I woke again, not to humming this time, but to silence. Thick, pressing silence. I got out of bed and checked Emma's room. Empty, but the window was open. I ran through the house, frantic, calling her name. Then I heard it, footsteps above me in the attic. I quickly climbed the ladder, every nerve in me screaming. Emma stood in the center of the attic floor, pale in the moonlight. Behind her, half shrouded in shadow, was Clara. Her arms rested lightly on Emma's shoulders, her nails digging in just enough to leave marks.
You shouldn't be here,
Clara said softly. What do you want? I shouted. Her eyes glowed faintly.
I'm not babysitting Emma.
Her nails pressed deeper. Emma didn't flinch. She only stared at me with the same unblinking gaze.
I'm babysitting you.
I tried to move forward, but my body betrayed me. The air in the attic grew heavy, suffocating. My daughter's lips curved into a small, unfamiliar smile, and for the first time, I wasn't sure I was looking at Emma anymore. The last thing I remember before blacking out was Clara leaning close to Emma's ear, whispering something I couldn't hear. When I woke, I was lying in my own bed. Emma was downstairs eating cereal as if nothing happened, but as I entered the kitchen and she looked up at me, she smiled. And I swear, it was Cara's smile.